Welcome, everybody, to Justice Served Daily. Appreciate you being here. I have my wonderful guests of and our justice researchers, I like to call them, Mama Bear and Kelt. Hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
We are and have been working extremely hard to get this presentation ready to talk about today. And we are glad that you guys are here with us. Hello, Evil CJ. I see you out there. Thank you for
CJ's
joining
in the
us.
house.
Yes,
Hey,
thank you.
CJ.
Hi, CJ. Thank
And,
you.
and if you have not checked out his show and you want just a very little calm, cool show of going over a whole bunch of stuff, go check out his channel. I'm
Friendly
sure
people.
I'm sure I could convince him to drop his link in there, Evil CJ. I don't know. You'd be promoting yourself. I know you like to help everybody else out, but maybe you can help yourself out a little and drop your link in case anybody would like to check out his channel. All right. Well, let's
Hey,
go
Dre.
ahead and get started here. Hey, Dre, how you doing? All right, let me get this pulled up here. And we know how fun that StreamYard can be, so your patience is always appreciated as we get this ready.
Patience is a virtue.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see here. Oops. There we go. All right. So we are going to talk about the serial killer, David Maust, and kind of discuss his happenings, his background, everything that we found out about him. There's a lot of sources that we credit for research that we did here, but it was kind of a combination of us going through a lot of different resources and a lot of different videos, articles, newspapers, websites, a lot of things, just because some information would match and some wouldn't. So we kind of had to deep dive to make sure that we were correct in the information that we're getting out to you guys. And here's a disclaimer slide. Evil CJ, if you find that familiar, thank you for sharing that, as we will be showing a couple of clips. So David Edward Maust, we're going to go through his childhood. And he was also known by kids, and that they would call him was Crazy Dave. So he was born April 5th of 1954 in Collinsville, Pennsylvania. His parents were George and Eva Maust. And Maust's parents divorced when he was only 7 years old. And so he was the second of 4 children. And he was sent by his mother to live with his father when he was 8. And then the next day, his father sent him back to his mother, leaving him with his mentally ill mother, who was also diagnosed as psychotic. Eva Maust went to a mental health court, and due to his mother's request, Maust spent 4 years in a Chicago State mental hospital from the age of 9 years old to 13, which is horrible. I mean, could you imagine? Doctors wanted to reunite Maust with his mother, but she didn't want him. So I did a little bit of research about, what hospitals in state left now, because, there's a lot of mental hospitals that actually, closed up because they were used as dumping grounds for different reasons. They would place people there because of disabilities that people that they could have, um, or just because they didn't really have to have a reason. They could claim it. So this hospital, the Chicago State Hospital, which is now the Chicago Reed Mental Health Center, had some history and stuff of that. But when I looked back, it was changed to the Chicago State Hospital name back in the 70s. So that's when Maust would have been there. And they also had the Dunning Asylum. So, and
You
this
know
is
what,
from,
Justice?
yeah, go ahead.
My first live, so I'm sorry if I'm interrupting the wrong time here. But I
Oh,
kept
no, no,
wondering why doesn't his mom like him out of all the kids? And I read somewhere that the mom once commented that he was the one that looked most like the dad.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I thought that might be a little kernel of why she started not liking him, because the parents got divorced, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm
And
sorry.
she just said she didn't want anything to do with it. No, that's exactly right. And that isn't that upsetting. I mean, because you're trying to figure out why is she picking him out of all of the children to put him in a mental hospital, and it's just sad. But so Eva had claimed that David had set fire to his brother's bed and attempted to drown him. And she described him as disturbed, psychotic, or Eva was described as disturbed, psychotic, needy, and narcissistic. At the institution, they felt that Maust's mother simply dumped him there. So those findings were of what they were talking about, Eva. Maust had a younger incident of violence, having choked two of his friends for no apparent reason. And Mouse's brother remembered that he beat a squirrel to death with a baseball bat for fun. And although his brother also recalled that Mouse was molested at an early age as well. So during his stay at the hospital, Mouse was well behaved, but despondent over that his mother was never visiting him. And when he finally left, he was sent to the Ulrich Boys Home at 13 years old, where he was subjected to unwanted sexual advances by another boy there at the time. But want to just kind of reflect back, guys, that really talking about that the institution that he was at the hospital, really talked about how he would just sit there looking out the window, waiting, thinking that his mother was going to visit, and then she wouldn't show up.
Yeah, he would make excuses as to why she was not showing up. Oh, she wasn't feeling good today. Oh, I hope she feels better. Just basically to soothe himself and make himself feel better as to why she wasn't there.
Right.
So,
Never blamed her.
No.
Never blamed her.
No.
So Mouse was discharged from the mental health facility at as we said, at the age of 13. And then this was a picture of the Ulrich Boys Home that he was there for 4 years until he ran away. And this photo, I think this photo that I may have is one that still may have included girls. I'm trying to look here. But and later on, it did become boys and girls home, a children's home. However, at the time that he was sent there, it was an exclusive boys' home. So we want to point that out to you guys as well.
Right.
So now we're going to get into his criminal history. And so on May 26th of 1974, while stationed in Frankfort, Germany. So before we fly into that, let's kind of fill in that gap, right? We have where back before he's released and he's trying to get out of the home, there his mother is trying to get him She doesn't want him. He keeps trying to go back and stuff like that. So I believe right now we do have a video, though, or I'm sorry, yeah, a video for the attorney, Thomas Vaines, that talked about it, his childhood.
Yes.
All right, let me go out for I can let you share your screen. And we're going to show you a clip of Thomas Vaines, the attorney, that he kind of talks a little bit about, a little brief statement here about his childhood, which is so sad. All right, let's add that up.
Just let me know when you're ready for me to play.
She's got herself on mute. I'm thinking we can play it.
Background too, which kind of explained, I think, where he was coming from. I don't know how much you were able to pick up from the internet, but starting around age 9 or so, his dad was not much in his life to begin with, but mom and dad divorced. Mom hated him, and at around the age of 9, this is 1963 or 64, somewhere in that time frame. I think 63.
Okay.
Back then, mental hospitals were kind of used as dumping grounds for unwanted kids. It's very strange.
Yeah.
Very sad. And what Mom did was go to a mental health court, or a court in juvenile court in Cook County, Illinois, Chicago, basically. Made up some stuff about him, and basically had him committed. We were able to obtain. He spent 4 years in a psychiatric hospital. We were fortunate that we got our hands on the records from his stay in that hospital, and the doctors made it pretty clear that he was being kept there, hoping his mentally ill mother would recover well enough that they could reunite him.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they would describe young David at the time as a bright, articulate kid, homesick for his mother, how sad it was to watch him make excuses for why she didn't come visit, etc. I mean, he was not mentally ill. he was not mentally ill.
Really?
But she was.
Yes.
And whatever attempts whenever they made an attempt to foster some kind of mother and child reunion, she was the one who resisted, not him. When after 4 years, at approximately age of 13, they discharged him from there to a boys' home, where he spent another 3-4 years until he ran away. But basically, he grew up in a mental institution. I mean, he would tell stories of being with kids who were truly mentally ill, or their term back then was retarded. I mean, there were some kids there. He talked about one boy who would be there only in the summers, and that's because mom and dad would get him committed there for a summer so they could vacation.
Oh, jeez.
And then he would recover from his mental illness when they got back from summer vacation. There were other kids there with physical abnormalities, mental defects.
Yeah.
Some were just essentially vegetables,
Sure.
kind of thing. But that's where he grew up as, from like 9 to 13. And then from 13 to 17 or so, approximately, he was in a boys' home, strictly boys. He basically implied that he began to get homosexual leanings at that stage. He didn't phrase it in that fashion. He just said the kids were just desperate for any kind of physical affection that they ended up turning to each other.
So is it a real case of, his later behavior was a real case of nature, versus nurture, or just it was?
Yeah, basically what somebody says, if you wanted a recipe for making a serial killer, this is what you would do.
Wow.
Hey, Justice, I just had an epiphany.
Yes,
You
epiphany.
have David Maust it happens, locked away at an early age, being abused. You have Albert Fish, if you guys know about Albert Fish, locked away, abused, horribly abused, according to his own words. And you have Manson, who was locked away at a very young age and sexually abused in these homes.
Yeah.
I'm not really going anywhere with that. I just wanted to point out there's some similarities between these homes producing people that have needs and issues.
Well, yeah, I mean, those asylums and stuff back then, that's why they ended up closing them up. I mean, you had people who were dropped off, for no apparent reason, or were perfectly fine, or even if they weren't perfectly fine, that they were experiencing where nobody was monitoring what was happening in these homes, right? And nobody was happening in these asylums whatsoever. So, it's scary to think that, like the attorney said. By the way, that clip was from Captain Borax. His link is inside the description of the show, so if you want to go and check that out, I have the direct link to the video where you could watch the full thing. I also have to his channel. So that's the piece that we're reviewing and stuff of what his attorney was saying. His attorney is an Indiana attorney, still an Indiana attorney. And right, I mean, he's sitting here and this is him evaluating this criminal who has done horrible things. But then when you look back at to everything that happened, that, okay, your mom can dislike that you look like your dad, can go drop you off for 4 years. He stayed in a mental hospital, lonely, waiting for his family, particularly his mother, to come see him or to come get him out of there. And then she just did not want him. And then let him then have to go from that to the boys' home where the sexual abuse started on him is just absolutely horrific.
Another part of that too, JSD, was, when we were doing our research too, it was frequent back in the day that people would just drop off their kids. I mean, just for a vacation. They would say that they were, mentally unstable or psychotic or whatever, just drop them off. And then, after their vacation was over, they'd go pick them up. I mean, sad.
Oh yeah. And here we've got Tommy's mentally ill this summer. Let's go drop him off, and we'll be back to pick him up later. I mean, it just breaks your heart. Absolutely breaks your heart.
Absolutely.
So I thought that was a good piece and stuff like that, and corresponds with some of the information and stuff that we found on some other sites and stuff too. So in the midst of all of this, what happens is that so he runs away, right? He's trying to run away. He doesn't want to go back, and he runs out of there, and he tries to go home to his mom. And so when he tries to go home to his mom, one of the times she actually holds him at knife point because she does not want him in the home at all. And then he sits here and has where his mother then sends him off to go work with his uncle in Georgia. Correct, ladies?
That's correct.
Yeah. Do you remember what his uncle did? I don't remember if I recall what he did for a living.
I
Not
believe he was in
sure.
construction, if I'm not, yes. He worked in
Yeah.
construction for his uncle in Wrightsville, Georgia.
Right. So he leaves. He's trying to come back again. Right. Tries to come back again. And his mother is telling him, I think it would be great for you to enlist into the army. And so she goes and takes him at the age of 18 to then be registered for the U.S. Army. And he goes to basic training. And while stationed, he gets stationed over in Frankfort, Germany, right? This is May 26th of 1974. So he's serving there in the army. He's a cook. And Maust ends up killing a 13-year-old boy named James McAllister, but he goes by Jimmy. And after meeting him in a bowling alley, Maust beats Jimmy to death in a forest. Maust was only 20 years old at the time. And when questioned, Maust said he accidentally killed Jimmy in a moped accident with a stolen moped that he had stolen. And he was convicted of manslaughter. And he was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. So before we go on to his time served, let's just talk about this meeting with this 13-year-old boy in the bowling alley and the severity of what he did to him while he's on this military base.
Oh, you want me to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, please.
All right. So there's some dispute, like, was it a bowling alley? We know that David Maust was a cook for the army. He was on a site in Germany where there was also civilian engineers working there, and that's probably how he met this 13-year-old boy, because his parents were two expats living in Germany. He meets this boy, and in his diary he writes, when I decided eventually that when his hair got long, I was going to kill him. Hey, I'm not trying to make sense out of it. That's what he said. He also tells a story how in the beginning, he woke up with the boy naked on top of him in his bunk, and he was annoyed with the boy. These are weird things that David is writing in his journal. Eventually, he says he took the boy out into the woods, and that day that he killed him, the boy's hair was long. That's what he writes, that his hair was long. He tied the boy to a tree and beat him to death, left him out there. The young man's out there covered with leaves for a month, and David Maust just goes on with his life like nothing happened.
And what's amazing is, so they're going, because when you're on a military base, you're going to be serving and getting sentenced from the military courts, right? So when that happens, he's now the boy doesn't die. We're going to point that out. Or no, I'm sorry, the boy did die there, and but he was only convicted of manslaughter, and so he was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. So they take him from Germany, they fly him back to Fort Leavenworth, right? But Maust only serves 3 years. Now, the one thing that we're going to try to really point out during this whole thing, now remember, he's 20 years old when this happens. He does not want to be released on parole, but he was released in early 1977. And the one thing that we also try to just emphasize is that every single time that he has been arrested and placed in custody, he has begged for them to please not release him. He writes letters, he communicates to people, he is telling them, do not release me. I'm dangerous, I shouldn't be around other people. Repeatedly, throughout his whole life, he is trying to tell people, do not release me. So here, he kills a kid horribly. I don't know how they went with the moped accident when the kid had been tied up to a tree. And then he only gets 4 years but serves 3. I mean, already we're starting a trend of that, which is irritating. But let's go on from here. So In 1979, in Chicago, Illinois, Maust stabs a friend while he was sleeping in his apartment. He was tried for attempted murder, and Maust lied on the witness stand, and he was found not guilty. So then in August 9th of 1981, in Elgin, Illinois, Maust decided that he would find basically the 13-year-old boy who had molested him at the Aldrich Children's Home, boys' home. And so he's unable to find him, but he goes and he finds a 15-year-old boy named Donald. He has a nickname of Lil DJ Jones instead. So Donald was stabbed and then slowly drowned in a quarry while begging for his life. And I know, guys, we talked about this, about how horrific it was in reading the story about Donald, because he was just saying to him, I'm only 15 years old. Please don't kill me.
I mean, begging for his life. Kel really did the research on that one. Kel, if you want to talk a little bit more about him. I mean, sad.
It's just the brutality of it, and how Maust was completely, seemingly open with describing what he did to this young man, and that he was begging, and it was a prolonged attack where he lures him into his car, he drives him out to Elgin, Illinois.
Yeah.
Elgin, Illinois?
Elgin,
Yeah.
yep.
Yep.
And it's a prolonged attack. He stabs the boy first, and that's when the boy starts begging, and he drags him over and drowns him. I know people who say their family have posted comments that the young man was just a bright, happy young fella, and that he's very missed. But other than that, there's not a lot of personal stuff about victims out there.
Yeah, I will tell you that is probably the most upsetting thing, guys, when we were looking into this stuff, because I wanted to also, just not make it about Crazy Dave and what happened in his life that built up to him, that what he became, and kind of point out that, because some of the mistakes that happened with Dave are still happening now. And it's amazing, all these years later, we still have it. But I think the other thing that's really, really sad is that when you go into the information, and I think media is guilty of this today, you can find tons of information about the person who committed the crime, and then very little to none of information about the victims of the lives that they took, right?
Sad.
And we really we're looking very hard and stuff to find information about the victims, because the mistakes that happen, the victims paid the price for the mistakes. Their families continue to pay the price for the mistakes that are made in not catching David when he was younger and having these issues, right? And not being able to keep him in jail ever. You'll see this. It's absolutely amazing, and it's shocking, actually. So
real quick, just I don't know if we really actually even touched on it too, that the reason why excuse me, he was there in the first place was he actually was going back. Did we really touch on that, about the boy that sexually assaulted him, and and poor.
Right. Yes. Yeah. We did. It said that it was the boy he was going back to get. Yeah. So obviously, there's a mental issue going on with trying to get the kid who molested him while he was at the boys club. Yeah.
And poor Jones happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean,
right.
Really
right.
sad. Sorry.
Well, then, no, good. It's good. And guys, we go back and forth talking the case all the time. Even as we were getting ready, we were talking and stuff for hours last night and stuff like that too. So we went through a whole bunch of stuff, and we're like, okay, there's no way we can't put everything that we learned and found out and stuff on the slides. We try to put the main stuff to really point out, but we learned a lot going through it. So, we continue in that same year of 1981 that on December 10th, Maust stabbed a young 14-year-old boy in a hotel room, and the boy survived. So Maust was arrested and sentenced to 5 years for causing bodily injury to a child. I'm not kidding. That is actually what the charge was. Just causing bodily injury. What happened to manslaughter or attempted murder? Right? It's crazy. So, but Maust did, somehow was able to always make excuses to have lesser of charges and stuff to that. So Maust ending up confessing, and I think it was probably to the lighter charge, but I didn't even know you could have a charge like that, right? So basically, because of that, then he's in jail, right? He's supposed to be serving 5 years. So in 87, while Maust was in jail in Texas, he was then extradited back to Illinois for the murder of the 15-year-old boy we just spoke of Donald DJ Jones, little DJ. And so then Maust spent more than 10 years in Cook County, Illinois, criminal justice system, awaiting disposition of the murder charge. For much of that time, Maust was confined in Illinois mental health facilities as a result of findings by mental health professionals that he was unfit to stand trial. So we've heard this of people pleading, but I mean, this is the first time that I agree that he definitely was mentally ill. There's no doubt and stuff about that, that he's in there. But while he's waiting, he's there for 10 years. So in 1994, Maust pleads guilty to the murder of Donald Lil DJ Jones, and then he's sentenced to 35 years in the Illinois Department of Correction. So here we go. Over the years we're talking about. So in June of 1999, 5 years later, Maust is released. He's released again. I mean, you check it and you recheck it because you can't believe it that he's out of jail again, because he isn't serving the time that he's getting every time. It doesn't make any sense. So when he's released, then I mean, it blows your mind, because then they're like, oh, he has no place to live. It's like, well, let's keep him. How about keep him where he's supposed to be? I think we were all shocked about how little time he actually served. Just over that period of time, he committed 2 other crimes in 81, and then he's out in 5 years after he pleads guilty.
Getting 12 years credit for good behavior.
Right. Right.
Okay.
And again, let us point out to everyone, when they were going to let him out, he did not want out. So I mean, some other people would plead insanity, right? For they can go over here. They don't want to serve any time. They're trying to sneak out, right? They want out of the system. That is not what Maust is doing. He was here again when they decided that he's got 35 years, and then they said that they want him go ahead and release him. He didn't want released. He was asking to stay.
Yeah.
It was interesting that the prosecutor wrote on his file that he was a Gacy type. He actually used the word Gacy type, and that he might be the most dangerous person they were holding in their jail, in their prison.
Well, the other two, he wrote a 5-page letter himself to the Illinois Department of Corrections requesting not to be released from prison. And the letter sat and was never read, but they
never did anything about it. I know.
Right. They also stated that
they can't even
keep him. So
yeah, they could not even say if anybody actually looked at his letter requesting to please stay in prison or the mental facility. Nobody read it. They can't prove that anybody ever looked at it and took the time to even pay attention to it in 1999. Again, that he's like, so ever since he was, 20 in the military, commits that murder, they go in, they only charge him manslaughter, goes in, supposed to serve his years, gets out early, please don't release me. Goes back in, commits more murders, goes in here to Illinois, waiting a very long time in a mental health facility. Then they sit there and he pleads guilty, supposed to serve more time, serves about 5 more years so he gets credit for the mental facility. And now they're like, okay, well, we're going to release him. He has no place to live. And guess what? He was denied placement in a halfway house. Yes, I see the E I'm missing in placement, and that's irritating me right this very moment. So then in 2000, after living in homeless shelters and a cheap motel, Maust moved into Oak Park, Illinois. And so in 2001, Maust had went and hit Anthony Miser in the back of the head 6 times with a metal pipe in an attempted murder. And he stopped beating him and then decided to drive him to the hospital, probably because there were some people around who were seeing him do this. And Anthony reported that he was beaten, but he did not say that it was Maust who did it. So I think he was just scared of him, that, wasn't going to say anything or whatever. And then afterwards, Anthony did come forward and later said, yes, it was Maust, but they never prosecuted because since the story was changed about that, oh, he didn't do it, now he did do it. And then Anthony kind of had his own kind of history and stuff of things going on. But I know that Kelt, we have some stuff and information about Oak Park, Illinois that I know you would like to share about when he was living there.
That's a little disputed because he lived in an apartment, and supposedly he was a handyman there or was doing work in exchange for cheaper rent. And a neighbor and Anthony said, no, he ripped up that cement in the basement, put down more cement, and then had put tile down. And he fixed a wall, like added a wall. I shouldn't say fix. He added a wall. Okay, so after he gets caught for the 3 murders, people are tracking him down, saying, well, where did he live? And they go back to Oak Park, and the police in Oak Park go there and talk to the owners, and the owner's like, no, man, this is the same cement I've always had. What are you talking about? This is the same tile I've always had. Leave us alone. They didn't bring dogs in, according to what I found. So they didn't bring in cadaver dogs. They didn't bring in ground penetrating radar. Sonar or radar? Anyways, I think it's sonar. So they didn't do all those things. And one of the reasons is the police determined, they looked at the cement and said, looks old. They looked at the tile and said, well, it doesn't look like it's been moved around or changed. The grout all looks the same. Oh, and there's coils, heating coils in that cement, supposedly in the basement. And the owner was like, well, if he would have torn up this cement, the coils would have been messed up too. So that's kind of where that's sitting, where a lot of people are saying, hey, we need to go back and look in this more.
And that's just because there was belief that there could be additional victims, other places that he was.
Now, Maust says he didn't. He said he was still abusing people. He abused dozens of boys. His diary says dozens.
Right.
But he doesn't admit to killing any other people.
Right.
But there's speculation on if he did or not, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But he made a little X marks on this map, and we never knew what all those X marks meant.
Right. I was fixing to say that. I think the map is probably the scariest thing, don't you? I mean, because
that reminds me of Robert Hansen up in Alaska had a map with a bunch of X's, and they found bodies for some of the X's, but not all.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely. I mean, they could also mean like where, he met somebody, where he picked somebody up, right? I mean, it could mean all kinds of things, but for him to have that in his stuff is kind of creepy. And then Mama Bear, the reason also that the police, we believe, really didn't go into stuff with Anthony was just kind of some background and stuff with Anthony at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, well,
he was just involved in some things that may not,
well,
police may not believe him if he said some stuff.
Yes, supposedly he was gang affiliated, and I guess he worked with him is what the whole thing was, but it was just a sad situation. He beat him in the head multiple times. He ended up serving time himself, several times.
Yeah.
He would wake up, I guess, in, sweats, through the night. He had a baby with his girlfriend. His girlfriend would say that obviously attributed a lot of his behavior towards what happened with Maust, what Maust had done to him. It just, very sad.
Well, did you see the picture of the back of his head? I don't know if we have it, but you guys can find it. The back of this man's head is a network of scars, permanent scars on the back of his head. He got hit 6 times in the back of the head with a metal pipe. How is he still alive?
Yeah. Well, and the intention of Crazy Dave was to kill him. It was just that suddenly, he stopped to do it. And I think the one thing that we're trying to be careful with is that, all true crime followers know this, and we know this too, especially even with like missing children and missing kids, and we found that to be the case here. Just because somebody has some kind of past, or a kid may have been in trouble or something like that at whatever age, and then to act like they have to be given less respect or honor, that that they were murdered or missing, it's just like that. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if the kid was, if a kid's in trouble and was doing this, that, and the other. It doesn't matter. If the child's missing, we need to look for the child. If the woman's missing, we need to look for the woman. If the guy's missing, if the boy's missing, whatever, it doesn't matter what their background and stuff is. They deserve the respect and the right to be found, to be investigated, and then they need to have justice for whatever has happened to them. So, and we're trying to be careful of that.
I
would say there's a fine line,
but that was why, I do apologize.
No, we're just showing.
There's a fine.
Go on, Kay. I'm sorry.
I would say that, gosh, we need like a little bell or a little thing that we can like light it up, and it says, I have something to say.
Hold on,
wait a minute. Hand that raises.
Wait a minute. Here we go. Ding.
Miss Justice, I have something to add, and I already forgot what the heck it was. Oh, it was about that there's a...
I like
this
Miss
comes
Justice.
up a lot.
I'm going to have Mr. Justice start calling me that from now on. Miss Justice. There you go.
Hey, that's a different show. Let's not do that.
Oh, boy. Here we go.
Back to the point. The point was that there's a fine line between victim blaming and understanding the victimology. Right? And understanding, well, who was this person? How did they get there? That's like, you can't blame somebody for being out. I don't want to use that example. No, but you can't blame somebody for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But you can say what led them there, right? And it's hard. It's like tiptoeing, because you don't want to hurt a family's feelings. You don't want to victim blame, right?
Right.
So, anyway.
Absolutely.
Well, you don't want to make them hurt twice. I mean, they've already had a loss once. Now you're going to make them lose again, and so it's hard to make that, middle of the road, I guess, if you want to say that.
Yeah. So then we move on to that after he gets released, and he's in Chicago, like we said. In 2002, Maust moves to Hammond, Indiana. This is a picture of his house. And we're going to go forward. And now what happens this next time that he's released in 2002? So David Edward Maust, Crazy Dave, found work at a small business. It was called Trophies R Us after moving to Hammond, Indiana in the fall of 2002. And like, regular small business, lots of little small businesses in small towns, it's manned by teenagers, which may have actually been his intention all along, for he could meet boys. So in May 2nd of 2003, 19 years old Nick James, who worked at the trophy shop with Maust, is reported missing. Nick James was a co-worker of Maust, both working at the Trophies R Us, using the ruse of jobs and money. Maust was able to lure James to his home. So we then jump to September 10th of 2003. And this is the last day that Michael Dennis, 13 years old, and James, I have it written down how to say it, Ranye. I had to get it pronounced on the phone to make sure. I want to make sure to get his name right. I want to respect him right. It's Ranye, 16 years old, are reported last seen on that date, on September 10th. So Maust met James Ranye and Michael Dennis at the public pool. Using gifts and promises of money and jobs, Maust groomed the children, establishing a friendship, which ultimately led to their death by strangulation. So we now have an interview that we're going to play. Mama Bear's going to play. Let me get off my screen here. And it is the interview with the canine officer, commander, who had been called up several times to go take in his canine dog into David Maust's house. And we're going to play that for you. So that's stream. All right, whenever you're ready to go, Mama Bear.
I was working a giant schnauzer by the name of Ammo, and he was cross-trained to be a cadaver dog. I was contacted by the Hammond Police Department, and they took me to a house, and they said that they had a suspect, and they had several missing children in the area, missing boys in the area, and they wanted to know if my dog could go into the basement of this house and conduct a search for him. Mm-hmm. So I put the dog into the basement and gave him this command to search, and he went to a corner of the house in the back corner of the basement, and he was trained to do what's called an aggressive response, which is to scratch at, like he's digging. Yeah. And he didn't do that. He went to the far corner of the house and just stood there and barked. So I pulled him back out and I redirected him again to do a search, and he went back to that corner and did nothing but bark. So I told the Hammond detective that he's not trained to do that. He's trained to give an aggressive response. However, prudence would dictate we better bust up some concrete here and take a look, because there's a reason why the dog won't leave this spot. So I cleared the area, and about a week later I was contacted by the Hammond police to come back again. Went back to the exact same residence, and what they had done is they had taken a drill and tried to drill through the concrete. And they discovered that they went down about 10 inches, and there was they was still solid concrete. So they went back to the other side of the basement and did the same thing, started a borehole there, went down about 6-8 inches, and gave up. So they asked me to send the dog again, so I did. And this time the dog went to the hole it would have been the southwest corner and he started scratching very aggressively. So I pulled him off, and the detective told me, he said, man, I didn't get that on videotape. Can you do it again? And I said, sure. So I got the dog back. He got the videotape up. I sent the dog, and the dog, instead of going back to that hole, went to the other hole, which would have been about halfway along the west wall, and started scratching there. So they got that on videotape. So after that, I told them that they should break up. They have to break up the concrete now. You know, that we've got an aggressive response. So I cleared, and I don't know, about 3 days later, 4 days later, they contacted me again and sent me back to the same house.
Huh.
This time when I got there, they had a concrete expert who had determined that this guy had, whoever the guy was who put this concrete in the basement, had used bags, and this was David Maust. And he had to use like some phenomenal amount, like 80 bags of concrete or some phenomenal amount. They also brought in a forensic entomologist who found evidence of coffin flies in the spider webs in the basement. Coffin flies are a species of fly that's indicative of rotting flesh, but it doesn't have to be human. It could be chickens, pigs, beef, anything like that. But they did find evidence of coffin flies in the spider webs in the basement. Okay. They also brought in a pathologist out of Indianapolis. And what they had done is they determined that all across the back of the basement, the concrete was 16 to 18 inches thick. So they moved out to where they could get a little bit, the concrete was thinner where the older concrete was, which was only several inches. And they broke a hole probably about a circle about as big as a garbage can. And they had me send the dog. Well, as soon as I sent the dog dove into the hole and started throwing dirt like crazy, digging very aggressively. So we pulled him out of the hole. And once I got him out, then the pathologist knelt down and started feeling underneath into the dirt. And he said what feels like a human leg joint, knee joint encased in a plastic bag. So they broke up the concrete on the southwest end, and they discovered 2 bodies there that were wrapped in plastic and buried under 16 to 18 inches of concrete. They then went to the west end, or the north end of the west wall, where the dog had made the second alert on the different hole, and they broke that one up, and they discovered the third body. The third body was this guy had apparently had to fill a bathtub full of a blue lead-based paint, and he had just had to continually dunk this body in this blue lead-based paint because the body was completely encased in paint about a half-inch thick. And then it was wrapped in plastic also. I don't know, maybe that was something to try and keep the smell down. I have no idea what the paint was for. And I do remember that they found, when they did x-rays, they found things inserted in the bodies through the rectum, like bottles or coat hangers or something. I don't recall exactly what. And up in the room, they did discover a map with X's on it where he had, we don't know, but assumed that he had gone to various places across the country on his way up from Texas. And these X's, we don't know what they meant. And that's basically about all I can remember. The next thing I know, he was in jail, and then he committed suicide. I was working a giant schnauzer.
I think the search that happened, and to hear that canine officer from the Hammond Police Department is just as powerful as could all get out. I mean, it's just amazing and sad, you know, just to hear all of that, and for them to finally go find, you know, these boys who have been reported missing.
Justice, did you want me to share a
Lost
couple of
my
the little
thing right there.
couple of little comments I found from people who knew the victims?
Well, let me go through this stuff, and we can do that at the ending, because we're going to continue to go through the victims' info. Let me, because
Okay.
I've got this screen coming up. If it will move quicker, hold on one second. Allow. All right. Hopefully, maybe, no. Maybe you want to, maybe you don't want to. Hold on. You know what? Why don't you go ahead and do that while I fix this real quick? Kel.
Okay. I think Cold Truth asked about if Douglas Wrestler or any other profilers wrote about him. I did find that Catherine Ramslin wrote about him, which is interesting because who is she? She's the one who did the BTK
Yeah,
book
right.
interviews that was working with who? BK.
Yeah.
Brian.
Yep.
Koberger.
Idaho.
All tied
Small
in.
world.
Yep.
Small world. A couple little things I found that are people who said they knew him. Just fun, nice little things to know about somebody instead of just, oh, they were a victim. That Nick James, it was a friend of his who used to hang out with him and his family, said he was just a great guy. She calls him, I don't know if he can swear. I'm going to swear. He was a cool ass friend. And they used to call him Mr. Blue Eyes. That's what she called him, Mr. Blue Eyes, because he had great blue eyes, and it was also his favorite color, she said. Another fella said, I'll just read it if I may. He said, I had the misfortune of knowing this psycho. I worked with him at the trophy shop. He made the medals and I painted him. I saw him make the murder weapon that he used to bash these kids with. I informed the police that I possibly knew the weapon used. My cousin and I were at his house and he creeped us out so bad we left. He was a very scary guy, very chilling with no emotions. My cousin was young, and this man kept asking him, when are we going to hang out again? And I watched him blow up when I said, never. He would have killed us. I knew how close we were to being victims. That's it. Yeah.
It's sad. I know that, and some of what I'm going to share here shows family waiting as they're trying to find out if they were missing. And I think it was not till the third boy. All right, now come on, allow. Let's see if it's going to allow me to do that. There it goes. It's just so heartbreaking from this. You know, obviously, this is the Northwest Indiana Times. And by the way, I guess we should have pointed out, maybe that's the other thing we didn't point out. Hammond is basically one of the farthest northwest points of the state of Indiana. So you can basically drive right over that and you're into the Chicago area. So they like to call it the region. You know, it's up there near not far from Maryville, Gary, LaPorte, all those areas up there in that particular region, you know, in that area. Now, mind you, this place that he lived in was a rented house. He didn't own the house. So these are just some of the photos that were of them searching. This is after they started finding their bodies as well. And these were memorials that were put up both for James, Michael, and Nick. And again, just family members waiting for them to tell them if, you know, is it the boys who are missing that were found. So quickly, I'm not going to read all through this here. I do have the probable cause affidavit for Maust, just talking about the charges and how they got into the house and why they searched the house. And having permission from the tenant on the first floor to be able to actually enter to the home, and discovering in the basement just how much of a large concrete pad that had been created in the basement. And they talked that it was basically 8 feet by 5 feet and 12 inches thick. And so, that's when they brought in the dog, which they acknowledge here. And then on December 5th is when the holes and stuff were drilled. And then that's when they realized that there was bodies there. And then when they opened that, the two bodies were found first, and then they discovered the additional body next. So after that, they had a written statement from Maust on the 10th, about him being in his residence. And then he talked about there where he basically said that with James that he had been drinking beer and shots, and that James had gotten sick. And then at approximately 11:45 p.m., he took a rope and put the rope around James' neck and strangled him until he was dead. And then he talks about wrapping him up in plastic and taking him into the basement. So as you can see, this just shows the 3 counts of murders, naming all 3 boys' names that they had in the case, and the dates. The 2 boys were together. That's why their dates are similar. And you can see here, all of this information is requested for sentence of life imprisonment without parole. Well, just to point out the reason that was done, because these are following that after there was an agreement made for David, because originally it was the death penalty. They did seek the death penalty. It's the law in the state of Indiana for the death penalty. As you can see here on this one, death sentence requested, and then it has each of the boys' names from that. So I won't bore you of going through all of those, but if you'd like those, we can have those connected for you. And then signed off. So obviously, when the bodies were found, Maust was soon arrested as a result of that search in the basement. And then he remained in custody in Crown Point, Indiana, at the county jail until his judgment. So May 14th, 2004, and I just bring this up just because of the information on it, and if you're old enough to know the show, an episode of the Montel Williams Show airs entitled Animal Cruelty. And the subject that describes how serial killers begin with torture of pets and small animals. So Eva Reyes, who was formerly Maust, that is David Maust's mother, and David's brother, Jeffrey, appear on the show to go on to speak about his childhood behavior. Now, David Maust's attorney, who is Thomas Vanes, describes Jeffrey as going on the show as a panel guest to describe his brother with half truth and half bullshit. Excuse me. Jeffrey later told Vanes that Eva got all excited about going to New York and being in the show from the audience, dressing up for the occasion, and all that sort of thing. The brother Jeffrey was certainly not the sharpest tool in the shed and was clearly angling for money and a book. So obviously, as you can probably tell that by the quote, that Vanes was not a big fan of the family of David Edward Maust, and that they were trying to go out there and he felt make money and tell lies and stuff about him after abandoning him as a child. in a mental institution, and then a children's home, a boys' home at that point. So he wasn't a big fan. So on January 19th, 2006, Maust was found hanging in his cell with a makeshift noose at the Indiana State Prison in Crown Point, Indiana. On January 20th, St. Anthony Medical Center in Crown Point, Indiana, with no family present, only correctional institutional officers, and a long night on life support, David stopped breathing at 7:24 a.m. In a 5-page suicide note found in his cell, David blames himself for everything that went wrong for him and damage he created. To his dying day, he states that he loved his family, although when gathering all the evidence, it would seem the sentiment was not reciprocated. And we have a very short clip, Mama Bear, correct, of the attorney again.
Yes.
Just commenting about commenting on the death of his client. Let me go here so she can share his comment with you. Let me add your, why is it not letting me? Huh. Oh, there, that's why. There we go. Hold on one second, Mama Bear. There it goes. And I should see yours pop up here. Maybe. There it goes. Add to stream. Sorry, guys. And whenever you're ready, Mama Bear.
I mean, well, as lawyers, we thought otherwise, of course,
Right.
on his behalf. But no, he was pretty adamant that none of this mattered, which may explain, consistent with that, he did end up killing himself.
Yes, he did. He hung himself. That's true.
Yeah, he hung himself in his jail cell. He had talked about it for a long time, and I just sort of figured it was talk, and caught me by surprise. I mean, I probably, looking back on it, I should have seen the warning signs a little bit, But,
Yeah.
but when it happened, it did catch me by surprise. So,
Do you?
That's it.
Yeah, it sounds that, that this attorney that he had at least had some compassion for him. He realized what he did, meaning the attorney realized what David Maust did, but it felt like he had some compassion for him, seeing what kind of childhood that he was experiencing and what was going on,
Right.
So, like we said, he had a 5-page suicide note. We chose not to read through that suicide note. There's obviously some details and stuff in there. I'm sure you can find it out there if you care to go look for something like that. But the one thing that I wanted to just point out here is his line that he had in his note, which is, "There is a long line of people who would like to see me die, but the families have a right to be in line first, then my mother, and then the taxpayer. Dying is not my first choice, but it is the right thing to do." And that was David Maust's line on his suicide letter. So I will say that when you talk about a child and whether a child has a chance in life, and that this boy turned serial killer started out life that at 7 years old, he felt that nobody wanted him. He felt that definitely knew that his mother didn't want him, and that he is put in what the surroundings are of a mental hospital back then, and how abusive and stuff that they are, and then going into a boys' home that he pled 3 times when he was arrested to please keep me in prison or send me back to the mental hospital because he felt better there. And nobody listened. And because nobody listened, he went from Germany to Texas, then to Illinois. Then from Illinois, we go to Indiana. And that each and every time there were 3 requests of please keep me in a facility. Please don't let me out. I'm not safe around other people. And that even, Mama Bear, like you brought up, the Illinois people were also saying, he is dangerous, do not let him out. And nobody listened. And they still let him out. It is victims and their victims' families who pay the price for letting sexual abusive serial killers out. Because honestly, I would bring up today, have we learned any lessons from back then? Because that stuff still happens now.
Yes.
We still have people being let out of jail after they commit sexual crimes, murder, and then act surprised when they come walking back in the door again, doing the same type of crime.
Yes, it becomes a revolving door at times, unfortunately.
And it's awful eerie too, because the reason that we did this case separate, we'll let you guys all know. The reason that we did this case separate is because this case relates to the same area of the next case that we're going to cover, which is Joseph Spisak. He is a missing paper boy from that same area, from Hammond, Indiana. Now, he was missing in 1974. So his timeline does not match with this timeline of when David Maust was active. Now, it did and was active with our killer clown just right over the border into Illinois, not far away, which is ironic. I believe that for some reason, all of a sudden, David Maust, for some reason, starts burying in the house he lives in the basement, cementing in these bodies. I just think it's a little eerie that he's kind of doing the same thing that John Wayne Gacy was doing.
Right.
What makes you want, it's like, hey, were they in contact with each other? Did they know did they know each other? That this was happening not very far away. But the next case that we are going to be covering is the Joseph Spisak case. And this is one of the serial killers that, was mentioned. It was in that area. We're gonna, and you obviously, if you're following true crime, I know you all know the killer clown out there from John Wayne Gacy as well. But in the research, found a third serial killer that is potential, and that was our wonderful my other wonderful research person, which is Paige, who's not on with us today. But so we're going to cover that other potential serial killer with Joseph Spisak's case and go into that. And you guys know why I have that interest in that area. We covered the Deborah Fulton case from Hammond, the case where, I was living there as a child when her body was found and she was murdered, and still wanting answers and stuff for that. So this is kind of went into that area when we found out, okay, there's another unsolved case, missing boy of Joseph Spisak with no answers. And we want to try to find answers and see what ways that we can help with those cases. So, yes. And I would like to thank my my justice team here, my justice research ladies, Mama Bear, Kelt. Thank you so much for being up here and going through this and helping us plug this all together, and us getting all these facts together for we could share it with everybody. I appreciate you both being up here.
Thank you for allowing us to be a part of it. And I think we've got a good group, so we're pretty lucky.
Yes, we do have a very good group. They are wonderful researchers and great people.
Good
And
friends.
yes, and good friends.
Yeah.
Good friends. So we're always following that and continuing that. So again, thank you to both of you for being up here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And you all guys
Thank you,
always see them in the
Justice.
chat. So, all right.
Hey guys, check out CJ's 101st episode tonight. CJ, you better come on tonight now that I'm advertising for you.
All right. Thanks, Kelt.
Yeah.
So the other show that we have following Joseph Spisak coming up is also, we're going to be on with Anya and Kevin with the Murder Sheet. And I've had the pleasure of getting to know them for a while and bring them on and tell you their true love story, which you'll see that I put heart to heart up there because I call them my heart to heart couple. And we'll explain that when they come on. But we will be asking them our questions that we have about, obviously, Delphi case and then some other cases that they have covered. And we will have it open to chat for you guys to ask your questions that you'd like to with the Murder Sheet podcast. So we hope you can join us with that one as well. I hope you have hit the subscribe button and the like button for me. Subscribed. I'm not monetized, but those subscribes do mean a lot to me. And we are doing the drawing. Once we hit 500, we're doing another drawing, 6 months. We give you the Discover Plus subscription, which has the ID channel on it. And I know if you love true crime, you would love having that plus. There's a plus of everything in there. Maybe that I'll have Justice Plus, maybe something like that. Anyway, but I appreciate all of you. I'm glad that you guys would be here. And I appreciate your time. Just making sure I haven't missed any questions in there at all. And thank you, Cold Truth, for being here. Evil CJ, Kib Kitty, Willow. I see you guys out there. Dre. Thank you all, you guys, for being here. I really do appreciate it. Trying to make sure I didn't miss anybody here. Going through all of it. It's kind of decent weather today. Not overly warm, but it'll be okay. Cherry Cherry. Thank you, Cherry Cherry, for being here. I really appreciate all of you guys. Yeah, I'm really excited about the upcoming shows. They're going to be great. So, yes, Evil CJ and Cold Truth. Cold Truth is here. She's got a great channel. Go check her out. She really does deep dives as well and covers great cases and stuff like that. I'm hoping that her and I can collaborate and do something together and talk about cases or talk about how we all got into true crime, that kind of stuff. I know Evil CJ wants me to go tell him about how I got into true crime over there. Absolutely. Oh my God. Thank you, Dre. I appreciate you quite a bit. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you, and I appreciate you being here. And let's make sure that we keep sharing the word and making sure that justice is served daily. Have a great afternoon, everybody.